We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, 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 new world order.
Tonight we are a country awakened to danger and called to defend freedom.
London's entire underground network has been closed after an explosion at Aldgate Underground Station in the east of the city.
When the Soviet Union collapsed, a 40-year conflict ended overnight. For the first time in generations, the West had no rival, no justification for vast defense budgets or global military reach. But power structures don't retire easily. Inside Washington, London, and Brussels, strategists asked a single question: who replaces the Soviet threat? In the search for a new adversary, attention drifted east and south toward cultures that were unfamiliar, faiths that looked different, and regions rich in oil and influence. Policy papers began to speak of emerging threats, asymmetric warfare, and religious extremism. Gradually, those phrases escaped the briefing rooms and started appearing in headlines.
The Taliban's extreme view of Islam is a foundation underlying these horrific acts by the terror group. Joining me now from Chicago to discuss religious extremism is Arsalan Iftikhar. He's an international human rights lawyer. He is senior editor of a magazine called the Islamic Monthly. He also has a blog, The Muslim Guy. Thank you very much for joining us, Arsalan. You know, once again, people will be leaving memorials and they will be muttering the word Islam along with all of their sorrow and grief, pointing a finger at a religion. It's unavoidable, whether it's fair or not.
By the mid-1990s, a pattern had formed. News stories that once described isolated incidents now spoke of a global menace. Films and talk shows echoed the same tone. A single religion, followed peacefully by billions, was increasingly presented as the face of danger. The fear wasn't spontaneous. It was cultivated, an emotion shaped by repetition until it felt like instinct. And from that emotion, a new industry was born.
A new threat had been outlined in policy papers. Now, it needed to live in the public imagination. The challenge wasn't to prove the threat existed, but to make people feel it. Throughout the 1990s, television news, Hollywood blockbusters, and political commentary began to orbit the same theme. The villains changed languages and wardrobes. The storylines shifted from Cold War espionage to desert warfare. Audiences weren't being informed. They were being conditioned. Across screens and newspapers, the unfamiliar became dangerous. Accents, clothing, and prayer were stitched into the grammar of fear. Within a few years, ordinary cultural symbols were recast as warning signs. The message was subtle but constant. Something out there was coming for us, and it looked a lot like Islam. It wasn't the result of one conspiracy or one newsroom. It was the natural rhythm of an industry built on attention, and attention thrives on anxiety. By the time a new century arrived, fear had become entertainment, and entertainment had become policy.
By the early 2000s, the story had taken hold. Fear was no longer just a feeling. It had become a framework for policy, a reason for budgets, and a brand that could be sold. Then came the moment that would define a generation. September 11th, 2001. In the shock that followed, questions gave way to certainty.
Hey, Beth, what is that? Somebody hit the World Trade Center or the...
It's a Trade Center.
The World Trade Center.
Now we have serious news of a major, a very tragic, incredible plane crash.
The images were unbearable, the grief universal. And yet, within hours, the narrative was ready. Headlines named an enemy before investigations had begun. The emotion that had been nurtured for a decade finally found its outlet. From that point, fear of Islam was no longer cultural background noise. It was the foundation of foreign policy. Defense budgets surged. Private security firms appeared overnight. Entire industries pivoted toward surveillance, weapons, and data collection. The war on terror wasn't simply a military campaign. It was a marketplace built on anxiety. From Afghanistan to Iraq, from Libya to Syria, Yemen and Somalia, different wars shared the same language of justification. Each was described as liberation, protection, or preemptive defense. Each left instability in its wake. For those supplying the contracts, it was an age of record profits. For the people living through it, it was a generation of loss. And in the middle of it all, new enemies appeared on screen. Names like Al-Qaeda and ISIS became symbols of terror overnight. Their violence broadcast worldwide, their message claiming to speak for Islam. But look closer and the pattern repeats. Their victims were mostly Muslim, their chaos perfectly timed for those who needed fear to survive. If you still believe these groups were fighting for God rather than serving a hidden power structure, it's worth asking who truly benefited each time they struck. And through it all, the emotion that sustained the system, the fear of a faith, remained its most valuable currency.
For years, the fear narrative defined the conversation. Then, slowly, it began to unravel. People started looking beyond the headlines, traveling, working, studying, meeting those they'd been taught to fear. And in those encounters, a quiet truth emerged. The story they'd been told didn't match the reality they found. Across the West, public figures began speaking openly about discovering a different side of Islam.
Television, you see these two cars, one black, one white, and they put a gallon of gas in each one to see which car can go the farthest. And every time the black car stopped first and the white car kept going.
One centered on discipline, community, and peace. Their voices were unexpected, and that's what made them powerful. In the 1960s, heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali became one of the first global icons to talk about Islam as a faith of dignity and conscience.
Muhammad, what is there about this religion that you find admirable? What caused you to join?
Peace. It causes peace, and it brings dignity to the black man, teaches him to stick with his own, do something for himself, quit begging. For an example, a couple of newsmen out there had gotten a little trouble. They were throwing bricks and bottles at them, and it was the Islamic teacher and me and my guidance to save them.
His example endured for decades. Journalist Lauren Booth, after years covering conflict zones, described finding calm in the call to prayer.
7 days later, in London, I went into another mosque and I said the words, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and I became a Muslim. And now, this is my second Ramadan, and my daughters are fasting with me, and our life is one of completeness and gratitude.
Former kickboxer and media personality Andrew Tate made headlines in 2022 after confirming his conversion during a visit to Dubai.
There's only one religion left on the planet. Wow, that's his name. That's it.
American preacher Yusuf Estes and artist Hamza Perez, whose story was captured in New Muslim Cool, added their own perspectives. Each journey was different, but together they revealed a pattern. When people engaged directly with Muslim communities or read the Quran for themselves, the fear lost definition. What had been portrayed as threat began to look like faith, ordinary, diverse, and human. The fear industry depends on distance. Understanding begins the moment that distance disappears.
For 2 decades, the same story played on repeat. The Muslim world as unstable, unsafe, unpredictable. But the facts began to contradict the headlines. As the West wrestled with rising crime, economic tension, and social division, countries once labeled danger zones quietly ranked among the safest on earth. Abu Dhabi, Doha, Dubai, Riyadh, cities often used as backdrops for fear stories, now lead global indexes for safety, order, and quality of life. Tourists walk freely at night. Families leave doors unlocked. Communities operate on trust and accountability, not chaos. It's one of the century's great ironies. The same societies portrayed as threats are where people now go to feel secure. In 2023, international wealth reports named the UAE the top destination for millionaire migration, ahead of the United States and Switzerland. Those moving there gave the same reasons: stability, family security, and social order. The fear that once seemed instinctive starts to look manufactured, because the story was always about danger, just not the kind people were told to fear. The real danger was the narrative itself, a story powerful enough to shape policy, perception, and profit.
For more than 20 years, Islam and politics were spoken of together, but rarely in harmony. Faith was treated as a question of security, not representation. That perception is now collapsing. In November 2025, Zoran Mamdani was elected mayor of New York City, the youngest person and the first Muslim to hold the office in its history.
We got the best mayor possible to be able to tackle all the issues that we're suffering as a city.
It's satisfying to see someone my age believes same beliefs as me, who wants to make it more affordable in New York City.
His campaign focused on housing, education, and fairness, issues that touch every New Yorker, regardless of faith. But his victory carried a wider message, that leadership can be about integrity, not identity. At the first mayoral debate, candidates were asked a single question.
Where would you go first?
That I would visit the Holy Land.
Given the hostility and the anti-Semitism that has been shown in New York, I would go to Israel.
I'd make my 4th trip to Israel.
Mr. Mamdani.
I would stay in New York City. My plans are to address New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs and focus on that.
The hall went quiet before the applause began. It wasn't defiance, it was focus. A statement that his loyalty was to the city that had chosen him. And it raised a larger question. Why had every other candidate given the same answer? Was it conviction, calculation, or expectation? For many watching, the moment exposed how deeply habit and headlines still guide Western politics. News outlets called it the turning point of the race. The instant voters saw a candidate speaking to them, not to optics. Mamdani's rise reflects a generational shift. Across Europe and North America, Muslim councillors, MPs and mayors now serve in the same institutions that once debated their belonging. Their presence is not symbolic, it's structural. Politics built on fear is giving way to politics built on trust. It's a moment heavy with irony. The city that became the face of the war on terror, the site of the deadliest attacks carried out in the name of Islam, has now chosen a Muslim to lead it. 2 decades ago, fear defined New York. Today, the same city has rejected that fear at the ballot box. If the goal was to make people afraid forever, someone's plan has clearly backfired. A question still lingers though. After everything we've been told, Was Islam ever the real enemy? Or was the enemy someone else entirely?
For a generation, fear was an economy. It sold papers, funded wars, and decided elections. But every industry reaches a point of decline, even fear. 2 decades after the towers fell, the story that once divided the world has begun to unravel. Information travels faster than propaganda. People travel further than headlines. And the distance that once sustained misunderstanding is disappearing. Tourists now fill the cities once portrayed as dangerous. They walk through the markets of Marrakesh, the streets of Dubai, the beaches of Oman, and discover hospitality that no news cycle ever captured. Every journey becomes a quiet correction to years of assumption. In classrooms, children learn about cultures once used as caricatures. On social media, friendships form where borders used to exist. And in cities like New York, the public has chosen cooperation over suspicion. The empire of fear is crumbling. For decades, it shaped how we saw one another. It told us who to trust and who to doubt. But truth has a way of outliving the lies built to contain it. Today, the headlines are quieter. The borders of belief are thinner. People are traveling, talking, and seeing the world for themselves. And with every honest conversation, the machinery of division loses power. The lesson isn't about politics or profit. It's about perception. About what happens when entire generations mistake fear for fact. Because when fear ends, something bigger begins. Understanding, empathy, and freedom from the story that once owned us. The world is not perfect, but it's more connected than ever. And for the first time in a long time, truth doesn't need to shout to be heard.
Subscribe for more investigations into the scandals, money trails, and power plays shaping our world. Because only by following the money can we expose the truth.